So, UFO propulsion. Some fun stuff. I guess when I was a young man, or as a child even, interested in UFOs. Like a lot of Gen Xers, I imagine, we all watched In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, and may have read a Berlitz book or two on the Philadelphia experiment or something along those lines. I think I read that particular book many times, but there wasn't a lot at the library that was near me when I was a little kid. But fortunately, that book was a good start. And then later, as a young man, I kind of blew it off. It seemed like a real fine way to conceal advanced research. What better way to deceive the public than to make your test vehicles look like they're from 1950s Buck Rogers comics, and dress your test pilots in the most outlandish outfits and give rednecks a joyride. That seemed sound enough theory for me, and I just kind of moved on with my own thing. When you're young, it's so much to do in so little time. But I also felt back then that there was definitely a better way to get around. That my pet theory back in those days was we could move great distances at great speeds by not moving, by being still. There's something now I would refer to as vector cancellation, which would be, your vehicle. Well, it all comes back to the easy explanation is the Monty Python song from Meaning of Life, that we're all on a planet that's spinning at such and such miles an hour, that's spinning around the sun at such and such miles an hour, that a solar system that's spinning around the galaxy at such and such miles an hour, the galaxy is hurtling through space at such and such miles an hour. Add all of those speeds together, and that's what you must cancel to become still and let the universe move around you. So cancel out all the vectors of motion of the universe, and then your destination comes to you. I thought that was cool, and that also was, I could accept the existence of aliens, and I could think, well, maybe that's what they're doing. I didn't have the desire to go further with it. Then later in life, I found it fascinating. I started getting books. Ancient Aliens came out, and Von Daniken's work started to really get momentum, and there were a lot of really compelling arguments just flying around. I got more interested, so it became kind of a hobby. I considered it a mental exercise, a weightlifting of the mind, so to speak, like a Zen koan, an unanswerable question that causes a state of contemplation. What is the sound of one hand clapping, all of that yada yada stuff. It was like that for me, and I started to get books. There was one called Grassroots UFOs. That was just a fantastic starter, if you can find a copy of that. And then, though, I got a hold of Jacques Vallée, and of course, the Frenchman that's depicted in the Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a real guy. He's, in my opinion, the most outstanding UFO researcher that there has ever been. He tends to alienate the believers and the skeptics alike, and that tells me he's on to something. When someone angers both sides of a polarized debate, they're probably right, more right, closer to something more relevant. But so I spent a lot of time on in the crapper reading about UFOs, watching Ancient Aliens and having a good time with it. But like I said, it was mainly, I considered it a mental exercise with no real end of its own, But then, lo and behold, I started to actually have genuine breakthroughs. Ideas started to coalesce, when you leave off on a process of thought, or a train of thought, or whatever you want to call it, the subconscious does not. It continues grinding on that. If you can let go of something, when you hit a wall, or writer's block, this and that, these kind of metaphors, the subconscious continues processing. And then you have a burst of insight some later date, which was the result of that subconscious processing. This thing started happening, and there were also eureka events, epiphanies, you might call them, of sorts. It would be like just 5 seconds of whistleblower testimony, or a particular rendition of a particular report of a particular investigation. There's value to repeated investigations of the same incident, either from different perspectives, or they're different investigators, different people have different perceptions and different backgrounds, different results, different insights come from it, And so, there were sparks that would ignite a eureka moment, and I started getting actual good ideas, and I started formulating some basic fundamental theories of the propulsion systems involved in the majority of UFOs, and at that time I considered power source issue to be impossible. Of course, when before I considered the propulsion issue to be unfathomable, and yet managed to surprise myself at the headway I made into the propulsion issues. It's a collective effort, of course. Everybody is throwing stuff out there, and that's what I'm saying. You don't leave no stone unturned, be it religion or mysticism or science or testimony. Even lies have value. There's a seed of truth at every lie. That's the seed they're trying to hide. That's why, the motive is evidence of some kind. I started having some concrete ideas, things that I could build on. I had built up enough Legos in the box to start assembling things. And initially, I saw, especially from Valet's work, and I don't know how to the exact pronunciation, but Aimé Michel, or whatever, his primary influence. It's another French UFO researcher. It seemed, and I watched a lot of videos, and so there's a critical mass you reach in ufology. It's like once you've read hundreds of the reports you've read number in the hundreds, and you've seen lots of videos, enough videos that you can pretty easily distinguish fake from genuine, and conclusive from inconclusive, even probable human, probable non-human / breakaway, whatever you want to call it, ours, not ours, I guess, and natural, or there's no such thing as unnatural or supernatural. If it can exist, it does exist. If it cannot exist, then it doesn't exist. There's no unnatural, there's no supernatural. But there are there's the planet Venus and your swamp gas and all that jazz, and it's mistaken identity, human error. There's a lot of stuff like that. So you cultivate a skill. I believe the internet guys, they call it discernment. It basically just amounts to the more you're lied to, the better you can perceive the truth. So it's a sense, this cultivation. I've always described the perception of truth, although it's an ideal and an impossibility, as that the pursuit of it is more analogous to a sense of smell. These things, they seem right. That may be, once again, that may be the distant voice of the subconscious, trying to interact with us. But so anyway, yeah, I started making some breakthroughs, and initially the association I made was luminosity and acceleration. So it seemed that there was a direct correlation between luminosity and acceleration. Basically, just that. And before executing a maneuver, they would flash or they would glow more. Well, the first association, of course, was luminosity. There was an undeniable that, and these are the UFOs of the 20th century, in the 21st century, and even to a certain extent the 21st, but the 21st century UFOs, by and large, a lot of the more recent sightings we see are man-made, obviously, and they've been reverse engineered, or they're hand-me-downs from higher, more powerful entities or organizations. And what we see are a lot of hand-me-downs from black programs and this, that, and the other that made, they want people to feel special and included, and that they're always just that we're one briefing away from knowing what's really going on. It's funny stuff. But initially luminosity was a common denominator, and then the correlation was luminosity with acceleration. So a lot of times as they sped up, they glowed. They were brightness increased, or before they execute a maneuver, they would increase their brightness, or just a change in color, which denotes a change in the frequency in the electromagnetic spectrum of the light, which is a change in energy. And then that led me to. So I had to. That stuck in my craw. I couldn't get that out of my head. That this association between luminosity and acceleration was like, man, I just felt this has got to be, this is key. This is going to unlock the mystery. And so from that, I decided that indeed light, the electromagnetic spectrum, was their exhaust. Whereas we burn things, expel things behind us to push us forward, and use the inertial laws and burn stuff and shoot it out the back and then go that way, and then aerodynamics and things like that. They were obviously not using aerodynamics. That was 100% certainty, and it was obviously entirely electromagnetic in nature, just from countless observations and effects. So that led me to formulate that the light was their exhaust in some kind of, techno metaphoric sensibility of that. Then at the time, here's where I want to show you some books that I use on a daily basis. These are important. These are 30-second quantum theory. These are these cheap little unremarkable cardboard books, $10 at Barnes and Nobles. Probably can still get them on Amazon. Here's the quantum one. Here's Relativity. These books are just gems, just invaluable resources for everyone. They each chapter has a glossary, and then every 2 pages there is one concept, and then an illustration of that concept, brilliant illustrations. The concept is described by a leader in the field. They give kudos to the innovators of the theory, of the concept. They have the related entries. They have additional thoughts than the avenues of research you might pursue if you're more interested in the concept. They describe the illustration, which is worthy of great contemplation in terms of the writing. Then each chapter will have a detailed biography of a hero in the field, and they're just an absolute joy. And there's no math. It's clear, concise, and the quantum one, it's just fantastic. There's not a lot more you can ask for. I suppose I should. Anyway, in these books, the primary things I'll be referencing here will be the photoelectric effect. You know, I'm of the mind that UFO technology is primarily heavily based on what I would call transductive effects. Transductive effects are effects that turn one kind of energy into another kind of energy. So your photoelectric effect that turns light into electricity, or electricity into light. They go both ways, dependent on circumstances. You know, one direction may be more difficult than the other, or then there may be a lot of difficult engineering considerations, material science and whatnot. We'll get into that. But thermoelectric effects, piezoelectric, my favorites, of course, piezoelectric and photoelectric, and I think those factor in heavily to UFO technology, to your common average, the glowing saucer with the luminosity that varies with acceleration, etc., etc. Your garden variety UFO that's been seen for thousands of years. So, anyway, I was reading these books, and in college I used to have a lot of arguments with, I had a chemistry friend and a physics friend. I was the neuroscience guy, and most of our coffee house conversations were basically boiled down to me asking them questions, and they never asked me much. You know, they were all high and mighty, you know, being chemistry and physics, lowly neuroscience. What can they do? What did they know? But I got a lot out of it. Unbeknownst to them, I profited more because I was the one asking the questions of their field and learning from them. And learning a lot. And there was we just talk about, you know, relativity, E equals mc squared, and so I have some definite opinions about E equals mc squared. You know, I think the E is kind of arbitrary, energy, joules, kilowatts. It's just arbitrary. To me, I don't think it means a lot. What is E? What is energy? What kind of energy? Heat, light, electricity? I understand those things. I accept those things. But generic energy, it's just a measurement. But it's part of the equation. And equations are symbolic machines. They have tolerances. They can break down. They can be repaired. They can be rebuilt, etc., etc. Anyway, E equals mc squared, and then you have the c. So the c is the speed of light. It's a constant. Constants don't interest me much because it's a constant. It's a number. It's one number. It's not a variable. It's not we're not solving for it. We already know what it is. Whatever. Of course, in the E equals mc squared, it's important because it tells us that a small amount of mass contains a large amount of energy. Because, here we go, what the equation E equals mc squared is really telling us, it's telling us that M equals L, that mass equals light, that light and mass are interchangeable. That's what it's telling us. That's the takeaway. That's what you want to take away from it. But then when you go back to the E equals mc squared, you have the number and you have this and that and the other. A lot of consequences from actually doing the equation the proper way, and and actually doing the math and understanding the math. I'm not a mathematical person. I'm more of a Faraday type approach to physics. Michael Faraday was a mathematically illiterate Scotsman. I believe he was a Scotsman, but he had provided great contributions to electromagnetic theory, and Maxwell essentially took Faraday's experimental body of work, and turned it into math, described his experimental work with math, and then got all the glory for mathematically distilling the essential principles of electromagnetic theory. Anyway, you take E equals mc squared. It also tells us a lot of other cool things. It tells us that as one approaches the speed of light, mass approaches infinity. And this is why physicists will tell you that going faster than the speed of light is impossible. And that's just a lie. That's just an outright lie. If admittedly infinity and zero are mathematical catastrophes you want to avoid, that's when the little machine, the symbolic machine that the mathematical equation is, breaks down. We call that a catastrophe. I do. I don't know about we, but a lot of that stuff's not my wheelhouse, but it's a hobby, so here we are. But as one approaches the speed of light, mass approaches infinity, and that's one of the essential elements of calculus is the science of change, the mathematics of change. As x approaches y, z approaches b, or as a approaches b, c approaches d. That interactions of change and how things change, and correlating a changing system with another changing system. But as one approaches the speed of light, mass approaches infinity, because infinity is unattainable, they say. You cannot have reached the speed of light. And they go, oh, they run around with their hair on fire saying light, time stops and mass is infinite, and yeah, it's hilarious. But anyway, so as you approach the speed of light, mass approaches infinity. All that means is you have to discard mass. You have your rate of acceleration. So if you discard mass as you approach the speed of light, and that discarding of that mass is proportional to your acceleration, then you can not only reach the speed of light but go as far past it as you want. So faster than light is an obvious possibility, and you can go as fast as you want. The only worries are, I guess, hitting a star or leaving the galaxy, whatever. Not going there. That's not important right now. So faster than light is possible, and I realized that. So then I got thinking, well, if energy and mass are equivalent, and light is a UFO's exhaust, and discarding mass allows one to go faster than the speed of light, and that mass is equivalent to light, then discarding light can decrease mass. So the UFO emits light in order to decrease its mass to go faster than the speed of light. So that it all just kind of came together. I was like, yay! I thought it was really cool. And then it was, I guess within a year or so of seeing that, I saw some whistleblower testimony of an aerospace guy, McClandish, I believe was his name, and he basically was saying the same thing, which was a great validation in terms of alien reproduction vehicles that the black aerospace programs had access to, or I guess given to them by mischievous Germans, because they were pretty ridiculously overcomplicated. But that's who thought, I thought Germans didn't have a sense of humor, but I guess they do. Anyway, so, well, then I thought to myself, well, man, I don't understand material science, and my physics is crappy, and my understanding of electromagnetic theory is hodgepodge, and that of a neophyte at best. So, although I've had this breakthrough, and I've figured out that, light and mass are interchangeable. Reduction in mass allows one to go faster than the speed of light. I'd made the essential, I guess I use that word too much, but I'd made a real connection between UFOs and relativity. I had not gotten anywhere with the engineering or the quantum side of the equation, so to speak. Well, once again, the universe works in mysterious ways. So there was in that book, Grassroots UFOs, there was one report that was really ridiculous. I mean, just silly report. But it had these humans that got out of a UFO, and they were talking to this lucky / unlucky passerby. They decided they were going to talk to him, and they were telling him about, don't get close to UFOs. They emit dangerous radiation. Of course, we find out, that there are dangerous microwaves a lot of times coming off these things, and particular syndromes and health hazards associated with them, and all that. But he mentions the photoelectric effect, and I started reading about the photoelectric effect, and I was in one of these 30-second physics books. Fantastic, gotta buy them. That's $20, so well spent. Thousands of dollars worth of education in that $20. And remember, the photoelectric effect was what Einstein got his Nobel Prize for, or one of them. I guess did he get more? I forget. But his initial work, his greatest work was on Brownian motion and the photoelectric effect. Although his world-changing stuff was, of course, general and special relativity. And I started reading about the photoelectric effect because I had that nagging suspicion. I guess the seed had been planted in my subconscious from that Grassroots UFO, that just down and out silly report. If you read it, you'll understand why it's so silly, because they say a bunch of silly stuff. But in retrospect, like I said, leave no stone unturned. You never know where inspiration is going to come from. Don't discount anything, anyone, or anybody. The man on the street may inspire you to the greatest revelation you've ever had, and you never know. You never knew. So, started taking a look at the photoelectric effect, and I asked the simple question. I said, does this photoelectric effect, it's a metal in a vacuum, light hits the metal, electrons are emitted from the metal. So you can kind of assume that if there's not in a vacuum, and the metal is a conductor, that if light hits it, you get a current, and that's technically called a photovoltaic, which is what a solar cell, that's how a solar cell works. But a solar cell is not photoelectric per se, it's a photovoltaic, it's a photoelectric system, but it's not, what I'm talking about is a single substance, one metal or an alloy or a composite, at some later date, maybe I'll do my best to go into what I would call a quasi-crystalline metamaterial. How cool does that sound? And then try to apply some emergence theory to that, which is properties of large amounts of a substance that the smaller amounts didn't have. Anyway, so the bottom line, I guess, with the photoelectric effect is you shine light on a metal and you get a current within the metal. Now I asked a simple question. I said, well, does this apply in reverse? If I run a current through the metal, does it emit light? Wouldn't this be the better light bulb? As opposed to a filament in a light bulb, we run a current through it that heats the filament to the extent that it emits light. Well, that's just heat. That's just, white hot metal emitting light. That's black body radiation, it's called. Full spectrum, or large spectrum of light coming off a heated object. I thought, well, how could they not have? No one has asked this question. I mean, well, they have. There are. I looked and looked and looked and looked, and there's X-ray machines, as it turns out, use a what one can arguably call the reverse photoelectric effect in a complex fashion to produce the X-rays of a certain type and kind for medical diagnostics. So I found an instance of a reverse photoelectric effect, but in a broader sense, I'm like, why didn't anyone ask this question and really pursue it? Because it's like, how amazing is that, to run, that it applies in reverse. Don't most things, well, there are a lot of questions physics doesn't ask. A lot of our science is flawed. A lot of it is misguided, almost as if it's misguided by an unseen hand, curiously enough. But and the innovators are the rogues that resist that influence, often to their own detriment and demise. So maybe someone did invent a better light bulb, and he was destroyed just like Tesla was destroyed by Edison and his light bulb conglomerate or whatever, his light bulb brigade or whatever. So I had found my mechanism. A metal, you got a metal disc, run a current through it, and light comes out. Disc loses mass. Disc is magnetic in property, so at negligible mass it would float on the Earth's magnetic field, almost like a superconductive effect. And at near zero mass, let's say 0.01, but put 1,000 zeros in between the 0 and the 1, call that near zero mass, they would, it could then be propelled in any particular direction at any particular speed with very, very little motive force. Maybe zero mass is even a possibility. In an advanced UFO, well, I don't like using the words advanced or primitive. Science, I believe, boils down to aesthetics, and every species has a different way of, every species, every person, every being has a different way of looking at the universe, and they're going to produce different insight into that very same universe. I could get into that more, but it's not what this talk is about. This is UFO propulsion. So anyway, so I found my mechanism. I was all happy and everything, and the reverse photoelectric effect. But I ran into a stumbling block in that, thermodynamics. God, I hate thermodynamics. Always a stumbling block. Because remember, science is the art of cheating nature. And nature has rules. We cannot break these rules, but we can bend these rules. We can cheat Mother Nature. We can deceive her into telling her her secrets, and then use that wisdom, that Sophia, to then bamboozle her into doing what we want, and then we can go places, blow stuff up and do stuff or whatever, I don't know, etc. But so I had to find a way. So I thought, well, thermodynamics is in my way, because if I run that current through the metal, it's not going to lose mass. You know, the power lines are not buoyant. That's because we're pumping electrons into it, and electrons are coming out. It's what's called an open quantum system. The reservoir is the quantum reservoir, or whatever, is we have a system, and the reservoir is, you know, the particles and the influences and the energy we can put into the system. Well, this was the whole universe, and when the whole universe is your reservoir, you're vulnerable to thermodynamics in a real big way, because that energy is going to go somewhere. And contrary to popular belief, nature does not abhor a vacuum. Nature seeks a balanced equation. So you put something here, it wants something over here. You know, as they say, nature abhors a vacuum. There is no such thing as a vacuum. Anyway, once again, rambling about another topic for another day. So I found this reverse photoelectric effect, and but the stumbling block was thermodynamics balancing the equation, and not allowing the conductor to lose mass. Then I realized how to cheat the system. It's with magnetic field induction. And then I also realized the perfect way to do that would be a disk within a disk, a ring within a ring, a cylinder within a cylinder, a cone within a cone, a sphere within a sphere. Essentially a rotating magnetic field and a ring-like structure, or anyway, all of those, you know, symmetrical geometric objects are good enough. But that if I induce the current with a moving magnetic field, then it becomes a closed system. That I'm not adding anything to the conductor, and also nothing can escape from the conductor. So if something does escape, that is energy that escapes. Energy and mass being equivalent, then mass is lost. And then once again I go back to the 30-second quantum books, and there is this comes back to a big argument that Niels Bohr and Einstein had, and well, they had this argument about a box, and then the box emits, and the box is a closed system, and the box emits a single photon, and therefore the box weighs less. So this, you know, so it's accepted by physics. This is something, and that was their premise for the experiment. The experiment was more about informational elements of quantum theory and the predicting the spin of the characteristics of the photon, and you know, kind of the, does the watch pot ever boil, that kind of quantum stuff was what their argument was about. But of course, you probably know that it's not that does a watch pot ever boil, it's that it doesn't boil unless it's watched. This is how it turns out, that story. But so anyway, but the premise of the experiment, and what it told me, is that, hey man, this box is a closed system. A photon shot out, and the box weighed less, because a photon has energy, and energy and mass are equivalent. So if energy is lost, then in a closed system, the mass is less. It just has to be that way. And then the cheating of the system is using magnetic induction, because I'm not pumping electrons into the conductor. And then of course there are other considerations. You know, I mean, you don't. you don't you can't induce enough current to cause heat. If you know what I'm saying, if you run enough current through the conductor that heat is caused, and then the surrounding air, your closed system is no longer closed. Surrounding air becomes heated. Then there's an exchange, and once an exchange starts, your formerly closed system is now open to the outside world, and you've lost your whole mechanic for mass reduction. So what that means is that the interaction between the inductance and the conductor have to be entirely qualitative. That the metal has to be exotic to the point that it emits light, possibly a narrow band. The safest would be visible light. I mean, if your UFO is emitting microwaves and X-rays and gamma rays, you're a danger to yourself and all those around you. Once again, that's why the ARVs are laughable, because the Germans handed them down these vehicles that were dangerous to the pilots and those around them, and laughed their asses off. Or maybe it's in their nature to overcomplicate things. I don't know. But once again, qualitative interaction, and this is important. And in any video I make, and in all the videos I make, I'm going to be going back to qualitative interaction. For example, there's an entire branch of physics called quantitative physics. There is no branch of physics called qualitative physics. Nope. No branch of physics called qualitative physics. You point that out to a physicist, they will laugh at you, they will ridicule you. I know. They're the high priests. They must be right. So all the resonance, phase locking, feedback loops, anything as cool as stochastic resonance, chaos, emergence theory, the list goes on. All of these, phenomena don't get their own field of physics. That would be qualitative physics, of course. No, there is quantitative physics. We're just counting things. So anyway, what I was getting at is that the interaction between the metal and the inducting magnetic field, which needs to be moving. Inductance, the basic idea behind inductance is a conductor moving through a magnetic field acquires a current. Because in the simplest of terms, I think of the universe largely as light, charge, and mass. Light varies on a spectrum of frequency, and the frequency is related to how energetic it is. Charge is either positive or negative. Mass is either interactive or non-interactive. Non-interactive mass is dark matter. So I consider gravity, dark matter, the Higgs boson, gravity, dark matter, the Higgs boson, mass. It's all the same thing to me. You have charge. The charge in motion creates a magnetic field, and a conductor moving through a magnetic field has a current inducted within it. That's why planes have to be grounded in certain ways. They have rubber strips flapping off the sides of the wings, stuff like that, for the static charge that accumulates as they hurtle through the Earth's magnetic field. Technically speaking, driving in your car down the road, you are acquiring a small amount of charge from inductance. The iron in your blood and the piezoelectricity of your bones, and then the ions involved in the nervous system, etc., etc. So anyway, the qualitative interaction, the metal, and this is where I'm currently at an impasse. Is of course the boogeyman for me is material science, because I'm just not qualified. It's not my wheelhouse. I just don't know enough about material science to figure out. I mean, obviously, historically, Mercury is a major player in this UFO technology game. I just don't think that it necessarily plays a role, perhaps in the manufacture of these quote unquote advanced non-human vehicles. The vehicle is the motor. I mean, there is no motor, there is no engine. The vehicle is the engine. Just like in often many cases, we have to reevaluate our assessment of these, because oftentimes they don't have a transmission either. The pilot is the transmission. I'll get to that, the significance of that later. But and I think the significance of that is that at near zero mass, or potentially at zero mass, mere conscious intent may be enough motive force, consciousness being a quantum effect, that mere consciousness itself may be enough motive force or intent to move a massless vehicle. I think that would bring us back to the stuff that Otis Carr did. Otis T. Carr, I believe. He was a little guy that knew Nikola Tesla in his later years. I think he worked in the building. He was like a superintendent or something of the building, and he befriended Nikola Tesla, and Nikola Tesla taught him a lot of stuff. And then Otis decided he was going to build some UFOs using Tesla's stuff, and they displayed some definite reduced mass qualities and even massless qualities. Some of his prototypes, they floated, of course enough mass was discarded that they could, they still retained their metallic properties. They could float on the Earth's magnetic field, but you could even pass your hand through them, and they said it was kind of like Jello or something. And that, of course, goes back to the Philadelphia experiment. What happened to those the sailors that were unfortunate enough to be in part of that experiment, and would also explain why it disappeared and ended up somewhere else. We don't know. I mean, they didn't know what they were doing, and Einstein and Tesla both, working on that. And but yeah, so there's a qualitative interaction there. You have with the metal, which could be a composite, could be any number of exotic alloys, this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the underlying concept, the fundamental basic of what's happening, and it's the reverse photoelectric effect that uses a magnetic induction to avoid thermodynamics, to avoid the consequences of thermodynamics, to cheat the system and attain a reduction in mass. So all UFO technology, for the most part, boils down to mass manipulation. And I believe a lot of the things they do and have done and will do it all comes down to mass manipulation. Because when you can manipulate mass, what else is there? I mean, you can do a lot of really cool stuff when you can manipulate mass. When you can toy around with things like zero mass. I mean, consider how revolutionary the concept of zero was. The Mayans were the first people to have zero. I mean, just that mathematical concept afforded them for their architecture and their philosophical and astrological pursuits. So when you can physically toy with concepts like infinite mass, zero mass, mass reduction, it doesn't just open up the speed of light and beyond, faster than light travel. You can also bend space and time, because you can set up whatever arrangement of whatever amounts of mass you want. That's when you get into the, you know, the higher civilizations and the planet builders and the wormhole makers and, you know, the, you know, time benders and all that kind of stuff, you know. So mass manipulation is powerful stuff, but that's not where this is. Once again, the UFO. So you have your rotating magnetic field, you have your ring or disc or whatever it is. The current is induced in the inductee, so to speak, and light comes off of it due to the qualitative reverse photoelectric effect. It's a closed system. Mass must reduce. UFO floats up. When you watch a lot of videos and you start picking out good videos from bad videos, you cultivate that sense of discernment. You'll start to notice things. You'll start to see, well, man, look at that. This guy, he's idling at negligible mass, and you can even tell if you know, the geomagnetic field is not homogeneous. It's got disturbances and asymmetries, and this is due to you know, all kind of stuff. What the sun and the moon are doing. Is there a quartz deposit underneath the ground, flowing water, a vein of metal? Is it copper? Is it iron? All this and that goes on. So the geomagnetic field is by no means symmetric. I mean, it is the basic symmetry of it, and even that's not symmetric because the solar wind blows it into a tail. And anyway, once again, but so yeah, this may be the end of the video. Anyway, one last thing. So you've got your, you know, your rotating magnetic field induces a current in the inductee that is the qualitative reverse photoelectric effect. Light comes off, mass is reduced, it floats. When you see a UFO with negligible mass, you can tell if it's in a disturbed area of the magnetic field, because it will slowly, if it's idling at negligible mass in a disturbed area of the magnetic field, it will slowly rotate. And I just recently saw a good video of 3 of them, and you can tell it's just an area of disturbed, that they're idling idling at negligible mass in an local area of disturbed geomagnetic field, because there's 3 of them. They're hovering, yet none of them are rotating along the same lines. None of them are rotating along the same lines of symmetry, and they're slowly rotating. Some of them will be perfectly still, and that's kind of like, you can find there are areas of quiet geomagnetic field where it is highly symmetrical and almost like a pseudo Lagrange point, you know, a kind of a quiet spot in the geomagnetic field, and there they can sit indefinitely at negligible mass, and that's a great spot to take measurements and send out probes and scan and do all this and that, this kind of stuff, you know. And then you'll see them, you know, as they go from negligible mass to near zero mass, there's a bright flash and and they're gone, you know. And you'll see that a lot, and you'll start to see it more and more the more videos you watch, especially in understanding these fundamental concepts. And just a further illustration of how cool this idea is this is something I just came up with a few days ago. Is, well, why do we hear constant references to counter rotation? Okay, well, if the magnet and the inductee, or the emitter, you know, the reverse photoelectric emitter, were rotating in unison in the same direction, there would be no induction, there would be no current formed. Because remember, induction is a conductor moving through a magnetic field, and that creates current in the conductor. Now they're counter-rotating, so the magnetic field is moving the opposite way, and then the outside ring is moving the opposite way from the inside ring, which is the inductor. And that produces, you know, as one approaches them moving in unison, the inductance approaches zero, and as one approaches them moving at exact counter rotation, it approaches double, just like, you know, two identical waves combine and double, and two opposite waves combine and equal 0. You know, in terms of wave mechanics, 2 plus 2 is not 4, 2 plus 2 is 8. So counter-rotation produces twice the inductance for 0 additional energy input. So they're doubling their energy output, they're doubling their power, doubling their emission, and that all comes down to the power source. And that's just a highly efficient way of doing it. Anyway, yeah, that will be the first video for UFO propulsion. I'll leave you with the counter-rotation argument for my reverse photoelectric theory. I'm sure I've left some things out. You know, this won't be the first video.